Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we're taking a look at X2, which is the second movie in the X-Men universe of films. Man, I remember seeing this in theater and really enjoying everything that I saw about it, and it's not hard to understand why. There's a lot of things that it improved upon the first, but at the same time, there are some complicated things that actually make things worse than you might think originally. I can tell you that my original score for this film was 88% a few years ago, and when I rewatched it, my score went down a little bit, and I won't tell you what it is until later, so stick around for that score. Following a shocking attack on the President of the United States, the X-Men must stand united with their deadliest enemies to combat a menace that threatens every mutant on the planet, and possibly all of mankind. So first off, I want to tell you about the best things about this movie, because there are honestly quite a few things that really impressed me that still to this day I love. And the first thing and foremost thing is the action. Out of everything in the first movie, the only real complaint I had about it, and it was a minor complaint, was that the action wasn't as up to par as I thought it was, that I remembered it to be, that it should be from a superhero level, from an X-Men level. It just wasn't completely there. It was okay, it just wasn't fantabulous, and it is here. So much of the action sequences I loved in this movie. Nightcrawler's sequence in the very beginning in the White House is still one of my favorite action sequences in general in films. It's very iconic in my opinion. The attack on Xavier's school, also very memorable. The fight sequence between Wolverine and Lady Deathstroke in the film is very, very iconic, very memorable in my opinion, even though her character is very flat, it's very two-dimensional. There's little to no development for her character in this film. I also really like the sequence when Magneto escapes from his prison by taking iron out of somebody's blood and creating metallic balls to escape with. I always thought that was really iconic. I always remember that sequence as being super, super interesting and fun to watch. So much of what you watch in this movie I find to be absolutely stunning, and it takes my breath away. It pumps my blood to the next level, and I love a lot of what's going on in this movie in general. I also like the inclusion of the Nightcrawler character in this film, as I've always kind of liked his character. Alan Cumming as the Nightcrawler is a weird choice, yet he makes it work really, really well, and you get on board with what he's doing. You like his history, you like his background, you like what he adds to this movie, which is just enough to make sense. I mean, you're already on board with everybody else on the team. They don't necessarily need anybody new, but I've always liked when they did add a new character and made them relevant to the X-Men. I also really, really enjoyed how they utilized Magneto's character in this film, as he's helping the X-Men for the most part destroy William Stryker's character. And whenever he joins the team, I'm always a big fan of, because it definitely proves the point that this is a multi-structured, layered film. And Magneto is a multi-structured, layered character and villain.
Is that what they say?
He may see things differently, he may do things differently, but he is still fighting the good fight alongside Charles. He always has been. And that's something that you often see in the prequel series with James McAvoy and Jennifer Lawrence. But to see Ian McKellen in these movies helping Patrick Stewart, and their chemistry has always worked so, so well together. And I always like when they work together. They work together again in Days of Future Past, for instance. But it's just one element of this movie that I've always really enjoyed. I thought it allowed for a lot of comedic elements. Also, I like the continuation of Wolverine's backstory, considering in the first movie he's kind of a loner. He kind of hates the world because he doesn't understand it, because he has no memory and he doesn't know what to do with that. And in this movie, it's more of a continuation. It allows him to possibly get closure on what he didn't have closure in the first movie, which definitely continues his story in a way that is satisfactory and that you do enjoy. But there's a couple of things in this movie that I really, honestly, did not like. When it comes down to the story, guys, I didn't like it, because when it comes down to trying to describe to you what this movie is about versus the first one, I have such a hard time, because it's not readily apparent like it is in the first movie. And it should be, because the driving force is still there. It's still about kind of racial inequality and discrimination and things of the nature. However, you're not as on board as you were in the first movie because you don't sense the motivation. You don't sense the value that the character has when it comes down to how they feel about this. William Stryker is not a love-to-hate villain. He's just a villain being a villain to be a villain. And so you don't really sense that what he's doing is that great, is anything that you can be on board with like Magneto had in the first movie. You don't really care about his character, about what he's doing, and you never really sense that his character even senses value in what he's doing. He's pretty shallow when it comes down to his motivations, which is unfortunate for an X-Men movie. And besides that, the movie starts to get a little bit clumpy, a little bit convoluted, because beyond that, you're starting to focus on Wolverine trying to figure out things going on in his own life. And then, for some odd reason that I still don't fully understand, it tries to ship a lot of characters together for no apparent reason. I don't know what they were thinking, if Nicholas Sparks was behind the writing team in this film or what, but so many characters were shipped together in this film that it's kind of funny. The two main relationships you see in this movie are Iceman and Rogue. They're in a relationship in this film, and of course the always love triangle between Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops. But that's not where it ends, because then it continues to ship other characters together in a kind of what-if scenario, right? So you get the shipping idea, the hint that Rogue has interest in Wolverine. You get the hint that Mystique has an interest in Wolverine, because let's face it, at this point, everybody needs to have interest in Wolverine. And funny fact, whenever I saw this for the first time, even up to today, out of all these characters that had interest in Wolverine, the only one that I thought made the most sense, that I was on board with the most, as weird as it sounds, is Mystique. It's the one that I found the most chemistry with, and they scrapped it as soon as they pitched it, and I'm still not happy with that. I'm still not okay. And the last couple they possibly hint at shipping is Storm and Nightcrawler, even though that didn't make a lot of sense. However, a lot of the times you're sitting there like, is that what they're doing, or is it more of a friendship thing? Because they're often really close. Anyways, all of these relationships and shipping hints are seen throughout the movie from beginning to end, back and forth, back and forth. You see it so many times, and you're sitting there wondering, what is this movie about? Is it actually about William Stryker? Is it about Wolverine's discovery of his past? Or is it about all these different characters getting together? And because of that, the movie starts to feel way more convoluted than it needs to feel for no apparent reason. So in the end, I'd say that this movie improved on the action sequences. It did a good job of introducing Nightcrawler to the team. It did a good job of showing a little bit more chemistry when it comes down to Magneto and the team, Magneto and Professor X. It did a pretty good job with things like that. However, it got a little bit convoluted when it came down to the story. It wasn't as fluid as the first one. It wasn't as simple, and it wanted to be a little bit more than it should have been, so it had too much shipping for no apparent reason, and the story didn't have as much focus as it should have been when it came down to Stryker, maybe Stryker and his son. There maybe should have been a little bit more focus on Pyro, because his character's development was actually compelling, though it didn't have enough of it, in my opinion. Probably because they weren't trying to ship him with other characters. I probably would have made this movie a little bit differently. I probably would have stayed away from the shipping, though I understand what they're trying to go for with that. They're trying to make sure that they included everybody and made sure that they were a part of the story and they weren't just in the background standing around. I understand where they're coming from. It's not always that easy to include everybody and still make it make sense with the story at hand, but I will point you in the direction of where to look for Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Everybody was included, had their own storylines, and they weren't getting all shipped together. There's different ways of including characters, guys. So I would stay away from the shipping, and I would include them in the story. For instance, in the first movie, Rogue was the influence character for Wolverine. She helped him understand the meaning of family when he thought there was no such thing. In this movie, they could have done something similar and help him realize that he doesn't need that past. It doesn't define who he is right now. They should have helped her be the influence character once again for Wolverine, instead of having him kind of realize that himself, which isn't that strong when it comes down to narrative. In the end, guys, I rated this a score of 85%. My original score, once again, was 88, so it went down 3%. Still pretty similar to what I originally scored it. When I scored things before, I didn't have a method of doing it. I just watched a movie and I felt a number pop in my head of what it should be. This time, I actually have a scoring spreadsheet that turns out to have a very, very similar score to what I originally picked, which is actually always pretty interesting to me. Guys, tell me what you thought of X2 in the comments down below. And as for YouTube, make sure that you hit subscribe, like it, hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, whenever that is. And until then, peace out.